You don't have to shout. You don't have to explain yourself over and over. You don't need to send long messages spilling your heart just to feel heard by someone who never really listened to you in the first place. All it takes is one moment, one clear choice, one action grounded in self-respect, and everything begins to change. Here's something most people avoid admitting. Toxic people aren't mysterious. They're easy to spot. They follow the same patterns, same behaviors, different faces. They push until you react. They twist your words around. They play the guilt card. They make you feel like peace is something you haven't earned. But the moment you stop fueling their behavior, it ends. Do it just once and they won't come back with the same power again. Begin with this. Create a quiet boundary. Not one shouted from pain, but one rooted in peace. Loud boundaries often come from emotional wounds. Quiet ones come from strength. When someone steps past your limit, don't yell, don't argue, don't plead, just shift. You stop answering. You stop opening up. You stop giving your energy to their mess. That silence, it echoes, and they notice it. It isn't about being passive-aggressive. It's about choosing self-protection. You don't have to argue with people determined to twist your meaning. You don't need to come out on top in every disagreement. When someone reveals their cruelty, their manipulation, or their draining presence, the question isn't why they did it. The real question is why you stayed once you saw it. And when you finally answer that honestly, the door to your healing opens. Some people only remain in your life because you keep letting them make excuses for their behavior. The moment you stop over-explaining, they start to unravel. They rely on your need to be understood. So don't keep handing over that power. Saying no is enough. Saying that doesn't work for me is enough. You don't owe chapters of your story to someone who never gave you a line of honesty. Next time a toxic person tries to pull you into their storm, don't react. Reflect calmly. Let their sarcasm fall flat against your stillness. Let their rude comments slide off a face that doesn't change. Let them witness you protect your peace without saying a word. It unsettles them. Why? Because they can't start a fire when you refuse to hold the match. Go further. Don't just end contact. End access. There's a difference. You can block someone's phone number and still let them live in your thoughts. But when you take away their access to your emotions, your time, your energy, your heart, that's when the shift becomes real. You stop mentioning them. You stop checking their updates. You stop letting their voice echo in your mind. That's when your freedom really begins. If someone disrespects you once and still stays in your life, what you're telling them is, this behavior fits here. But the first time you calmly show them it doesn't, the entire dynamic changes. Not because they evolved, but because you did. And sometimes that one quiet move is all it takes to get your peace back. This isn't about revenge. It's not about being distant just to hurt someone. It's about drawing a line that says, I respect myself too much to stay in your storm. And once you make that choice, even once, the people who drained you won't know how to reach you anymore. And you start breathing differently. Toxic people often depend on how you respond. It's not just your words. They study your reactions, how flustered you get, how many chances you give. The more emotional your response, the more control they believe they have. They thrive in that chaos. They memorize your emotional patterns. The moment you start raising your voice, defending yourself, or explaining every step, they feel like they're in control. That's why the silent boundary works so well. It stops the whole game. It throws them off balance. They expect drama. They expect emotion. When you meet them with stillness and no reaction, they're lost. That's real power. A silent boundary doesn't mean ghosting or giving someone the cold shoulder to punish them. It's a choice, a decision you make inside yourself that someone no longer deserves access to what they used to take for granted. It means, I'm done showing you how to treat me. From now on, your actions have consequences. Mistreating me means losing me. You don't make a big announcement. You don't give a final speech. You don't try to make them understand. You just move. The talks get shorter. The explanations fade. The emotional effort disappears. You respond with peace instead of trying to prove something. Slowly they realize the grip they once had is slipping. Toxic people don't respond to facts. They respond to your energy. That's why reasoning with them feels pointless. They bend the truth. They avoid responsibility. They manipulate feelings. But when you react with calm and detachment, when you set a boundary that's neither loud nor emotional, they lose their footing. Picture this, someone putting on a dramatic show in a room full of people. Then the lights go off, the room empties, no spotlight, no crowd. Suddenly the performance doesn't matter. Eventually they walk off stage. Silent boundaries are powerful because they keep your peace safe without draining you. You don't have to spend energy proving your pain. You don't have to write letters defending your choice. You don't even need to hear them admit they were wrong. You stopped needing their approval. And that's when the healing begins. When you stop needing toxic people to understand your feelings, you start to feel lighter. And they notice. They sense the silence. They feel the distance. And they realize that whatever control they thought they had is gone. They're now playing their games alone. The beauty in this is that it requires no confrontation. Not everyone deserves a final talk. Not everyone deserves closure. Some people deserve exactly what they gave you, absence. And when you give them that, not out of spite, but out of self-love, that silence says more than any words could. It says, I no longer need to be heard by someone who only listened when it suited them. I've let go of the cycle. And here's what happens next. When you begin setting quiet boundaries, you start attracting calm into your world. You see that not everything needs your response. Not every insult deserves attention. Not every false claim requires correction. Some things simply don't deserve your energy. That's not being cold. That's being wise. That's emotional strength. That's choosing to lead with grace instead of fear. The minute you choose calm over chaos, silence over shouting, you start teaching others how you expect to be treated. And toxic people, they don't stay when they're not being fed. When you stop being available for their games, their tension, the emotional back and forth, they back away. Not because you pushed them, but because your peace no longer gives space to their confusion. You don't have to scream to get free. You only need one clear decision made with calm and followed with peace. Set the boundary once. Let your quiet be the message you're tired of explaining, and watch how fast those who fed off your reactions have nothing left to take. Toxic people don't really listen to your words. They watch your patterns. They test how far they can go before you push back. And when you try to explain or reason, they twist it against you. That's why confrontation often doesn't work. What does work is mirroring, not mimicking, but reflecting. You stay calm. You hold a mirror to their behavior. You don't react with emotion. You show them what they're doing by not participating in the game. When someone disrespects you with words, mirror it by not responding with anger, but with boundaries. When someone tries to guilt trip you, don't explain or justify. Let the guilt drop. When they gaslight you, don't lose your ground. Just say, "That's not how I experienced it," and leave it there. The goal isn't to get them to agree. The goal is to stand in your truth and let them handle their confusion on their own. That's why mirroring is so effective. It's not about fighting back. It's about making their behavior impossible to ignore. Say someone keeps cutting you off while you talk, not by accident, but to silence you. You don't do it back with anger. You stay silent. You pause. You let your stillness make them notice. You don't say, "You keep interrupting me." You just stop speaking. And that quiet, over time, becomes louder than any confrontation. Or maybe they blame you for things that were never your fault. Instead of defending yourself like before, you hold steady. They say, "This is on you," and you respond with calm, "That's not how I see it." No emotion, no trying to be right. That stillness, that quiet confidence ends the cycle of emotional back and forth. Because that's the truth. When you stop responding the way they expect, they lose the script. And you finally reclaim your peace. The key is staying grounded. Toxic people want you to get emotional because emotions are easier to control. But when you're calm, when you're steady, when you reflect their patterns instead of reacting to them, they lose the power to steer the situation. You're not there to rescue them. You're there to protect yourself. And mirroring is one of the cleanest ways to do that without letting go of your self-respect. It's important to understand that mirroring isn't about payback. You're not doing it to hurt anyone. You're doing it to stay safe. You're creating a psychological space, a pause, a moment where they can see themselves more clearly through your unshaken presence. Whether or not they use that moment to change is not your job. Your role is to stop handing them the emotional fuel they need to keep the dysfunction alive. And this isn't just about hurtful words. It applies to emotional distance, guilt games, manipulation, even quiet hostility. When someone sends a cold, clipped message designed to make you doubt yourself and you answer with calm detachment, they are left sitting with their own bitterness. You're not being rude. You're just not part of their game anymore. And right then, they have to sit alone in their own discomfort. Mirroring helps you shift the dynamic without causing more drama. You're no longer playing tug of war. You're letting them pull on a rope you're no longer holding. You don't need to raise your voice or explain yourself endlessly. You simply show, through your steady response, that their behavior no longer moves you. That's when the cycle begins to break. That's when they realize their power over you isn't what it used to be. And that's when you start reclaiming the emotional space they once took over. Toxic people often depend on your explanations to keep control. Every time you try to clarify, defend, or explain your decisions, you're giving them more to twist and turn against you. Over-explaining usually comes from a place of wanting to be understood, of wanting to be seen as kind, fair, or reasonable. But with toxic people, that openness is just ammunition. They don't care about clarity, they care about control. And as long as you keep explaining, they keep shifting the story to benefit themselves. That's why one of the most powerful things you can do is stop explaining. Not out of spite, but out of respect for yourself. Because the truth is, people who truly respect you won't need 5 long messages to understand a simple no. When you explain too much, what you're really doing is asking for permission. You might not realize it, but every time you list out your reasons for setting a boundary or walking away, you're hoping they'll understand and agree. But toxic people rarely do. They will find cracks in your reasons. They'll flip the story to make it sound like you're the one at fault. You'll say, I'm stepping away because I need space, and they'll say, so I'm the one causing all your issues now? That's how they bait you. That's how they drag you back into a fight, and suddenly your boundary becomes another never-ending argument. But when you stop over-explaining, you cut the cord. You don't owe detailed justifications to people who ignore your feelings. If someone asks why you didn't answer their call, you don't need to give them a rundown of your entire schedule. I was busy is enough. If someone questions your boundary, it's what I need right now is enough. No rehearsed speech, no added detail. The less you explain, the clearer your message becomes. Your choices are no longer open for debate. It takes real courage to resist the urge to explain, especially when you've spent a lifetime trying to keep the peace. Maybe you grew up thinking love had to be earned by pleasing others, by being smaller, quieter, more agreeable. But eventually you learn that your peace isn't a negotiation. Your needs are not up for trial. You are allowed to make decisions based on what feels right, even if others don't understand. You teach people how to treat you not just by what you say, but by what you tolerate and repeat. If you find yourself explaining the same thing over and over to someone who refuses to listen, you have to ask yourself, are they really confused, or are they just pretending to be so they can keep crossing the line? Because confusion fades when the truth is clear. Disrespect stays no matter how clear you are. And once you see that, you stop explaining, you start choosing. There's also a deep peace that comes from trusting yourself. When you stop explaining everything, you start standing more firmly in your own truth. You realize you don't need to be understood by someone who doesn't care to understand. You don't need approval from those who only support you when it benefits them. That quiet space after their question, when you don't answer the way they expect, holds real power. It says, I no longer need your approval to feel okay. And it's not about being harsh or distant. It's about being clear. You still communicate, but now you do it with calm confidence. You speak with purpose, not to defend. You make choices without performing for validation. That kind of presence is strong and even a little intimidating to those who once fed off your uncertainty. Because now they can't guilt you, they can't twist your words, and they can't shake your peace. Letting go of over-explaining doesn't mean shutting down. It means you've started speaking in a new way. The language of healthy boundaries, self-respect, and steady strength. It's a language toxic people simply don't understand. And that's exactly why they begin to disappear. Not because you forced them out, but because you stopped giving them a reason to stay. Toxic people are drawn to emotional reactions. They thrive on your ups and downs, your anger, your tears, your confusion. The more unpredictable your reactions, the more interesting you are to them. That's why they create conflict, push your buttons, and stir up drama they know will hurt. But when you take away that emotional response, when you stop being entertaining to them, they lose interest. This is what the gray rock method is all about. You become emotionally unexciting, like a dull rock. Calm, steady, untouched. And for someone who feeds off chaos and attention, that's unbearable. It might feel strange at first, especially if you're naturally expressive and sensitive. You're used to reacting when someone crosses a boundary. You want to stand up for yourself. You want to be heard. But with someone toxic, engaging emotionally is a trap. It doesn't bring closure. It only invites more control. They don't want peace. They want proof that they still affect you. But when you go gray rock, you remove that proof. That doesn't mean you become numb. It means you stay calm on the outside even if you feel hurt or angry inside. It means not handing your pain to someone who will only use it against you. You treat them the way you would a stranger asking for directions. Short, polite, emotionless. Okay, sure. That's fine. No story, no intensity, no extra explanation. Your tone stays flat, your body relaxed, your energy even, and in that stillness they find nothing to feed on. They may try harder at first. They might say something cruel to get under your skin. They might poke at old wounds or try to make you feel small. But you stay grounded. You don't raise your voice. You don't explain your reasoning. You let their words fall away. They look for an emotional spark, but you don't give them one. That's your strength, the choice not to react. This approach is especially helpful in situations where cutting someone off completely isn't possible. In a job, a co-parenting setup, or some family relationships, you still have to speak, but you don't have to connect. You don't share personal details. You don't open up emotionally. You don't give them insight into your mind or heart. Every answer is thoughtful. Every reply is filtered. You keep it brief, neutral, and focused only on what's necessary. Eventually, they lose interest because the only control they ever had was what you allowed them to have. And you've stopped giving them anything they can use. There is real strength in becoming emotionally untouchable. You're no longer running around trying to prove yourself or defend your peace. You're not bleeding emotionally in front of people who would only point and blame. You've made a decision to stop feeding the cycle. And that decision sends a loud message. I am no longer available for your manipulation. And that doesn't make you uncaring. It doesn't make you cold. It makes you free. You're not afraid of conflict. You're just not giving it a stage. You're not closing down. You're just deciding who gets to see the real you. Toxic people depend on emotional reactions. They want to feel like they control your mood. But when you practice the Grey Rock method, they realize they no longer hold that key. You've become someone they can't sway because you've stopped handing them your softest parts. In time, they give up. Not because you told them to, but because they find no place to play their games anymore.